Luigi Mangione, the man accused of killing United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson, is making headlines once again. U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi announced on Tuesday Mangione's murder of Brian Thompson, an innocent man and father of 2 young children, was premeditated, cold-blooded assassination that shocked America. After careful consideration, I have directed federal prosecutors to seek the death penalty in this case as we carry out President Trump's agenda to stop violent crime and make America safe again.
Mangione, a 26-year-old Ivy League graduate, belongs to a prominent real estate family in Maryland. He is facing separate federal and state murder charges. Mangione's lawyer, Karen Friedman Agnifilo, said on Tuesday the Justice Department has moved from the dysfunctional to the barbaric.
The announcement sparked reactions from many in the mainstream media. The View's co-host Sunny Hostin had this to say. Let's watch.
This is unusual, actually, for the Justice Department. Basically, there is something that you generally have to go through. You go through Main Justice, you go through the U.S. Attorney's Office of the Southern District of New York. There are meetings that are held. There are standards that need to be met, and then it goes to the Attorney General. And so it seems like she's leapfrogged. Yeah, she's really leapfrogged the enshrined process for a death penalty case, which is the most serious case. I was one of those federal prosecutors that doesn't believe in the death penalty, and so I didn't try death penalty cases. But I will say this, he's facing state and federal charges. And so generally, when there's a state like New York that doesn't have the death penalty, the federal government doesn't usurp that. They try the federal case later, and then they don't seek the death penalty because New York doesn't generally seek the death penalty. So it just seems like an assault on the process for me. It just seems like the Attorney General is acting really against sort of our institutional standards, which is what this administration is doing.
The View hosts also spoke about Mangione's popularity, which might lead to a political backlash if the death penalty is pressed. Let's watch.
He's kind of become a cult hero. I don't think it's right on circles on the left and some parts of the right that see him as this sort of populist warrior.
Why is it on the left?
With
why isn't it on the left? It's just it's about
taking
healthcare.
on a.
Yeah,
but I don't want to amplify it because I disagree with it.
Far right and far left meet on anti-corporation.
Murder is bad no matter what.
So
but all I'm saying is that politically it could be a backlash against Republicans.
I don't think that.
Give him the death penalty.
The far right and the far left meet when it comes to corporate greed, and so this was something that united the extremes on both ends.
Politico, in Tuesday's edition of The Playbook, mentioned Mangione's death penalty news under the title, How Trump Loses Gen Z.
Many on the right blasted Politico for that headline. Daily Caller White House correspondent Reagan Reese wrote on X, Playbook becomes more insufferable each day.
American Commitment President Phil Kerpen wrote, Politico is so hopelessly millennial.
And RNC senior advisor Gates McGavick also chimed in, highly recommend that whoever came up with this framing go outside and touch some grass. Yeah, I don't think they're going to lose Gen Z over whether they do or do not execute Luigi Mangione. I also would say that I am personally indifferent to that course of action. I am neither
indifferent to putting a man to death, Robby.
Who is absolutely guilty, and there is no doubt whatsoever that he did it.
I thought we might find some libertarian, liberal common ground on opposition to the death penalty, but we don't, obviously.
Well, we agree. I would not have the death penalty because I would just not give the government this power, because there have been cases, we now know, where they executed someone who was innocent. And obviously also imprisoning someone for life is a bad thing to do to an innocent person, but you can make it up to someone if you haven't, you can pay them off to some degree. You can't do anything for someone you've already killed. Right. So for that reason, I oppose it not on moral grounds, not on philosophical grounds, but just on the practical grounds that the government does make mistakes, and you can't undo a mistake of that magnitude to the same degree you can undo a mistake of life in prison. However, in cases where the guilt is just so obvious and overwhelming, where there's video footage and there's no, I don't think he has some right to it's not like a moral opposition to him dying as a result of having killed someone. So I will shed no tears for them doing it in this case. I felt the same way about the Boston bomber, for example. I think it's better to reserve the death penalty for cases of socially scarring, bad violence, maybe not just the murder. This is kind of gross to talk about, but like a mass killing or something like that, it would be appropriate. as in the case with the Boston bomber, where again the guilt is not, he should have due process, entitled to trial by jury, best defense, but there's no question of the guilt. If they execute you, that's fine with me.
Yeah.
But so that's where I come down on it.
Yeah, I mean, so I don't believe in the death penalty, period. I many years ago interviewed a man in Ireland, or an Irish man in Britain, who had been wrongfully convicted. There was a movie made about his case, In the Name of the Father. Jerry Conlon, who was in prison for, I think, 14 or 16 years and eventually exonerated and released. That man would have almost certainly received the death penalty had that been part of the picture at that time. I also think in the United States there's a record of black people who are convicted getting the death penalty more readily than white people who are convicted of capital murder. All that being said, I take your point about mass killings, and I was actually struck in looking at the Mangione case that it is really quite unusual in terms of these federal cases. It is the Boston bomber, the guy Dylan Roof, convicted of the Charleston massacre, faces the death penalty. The guy who did the Tree of Life synagogue shooting faces the death penalty. Mangione, look, you got to be careful here. I'm not endorsing him murdering someone, but it was one person whom he killed, and it is more normal for the death penalty to be pressed in the case of mass killings.
Yeah, that's fine with me. If it's life in prison, that's just fine. Actually, my stronger view on the death penalty is that the manner in which we do it is absolutely barbaric and has become more horrific over time, which is a really weird thing to happen, because in most ways our society has become less tolerant of like torture and violence and horror, and like we don't hang, draw, and quarter people anymore. But we have taken a serious backstep in trying to medicalize and make distance the process of ending someone's life. The combination of injections and drugs, for one thing, we don't know that it is not painful. It often fails, and they have to do it again, which is psychologically a form of torture on the person. This is, I'm sorry, this is very direct, but this is not an improvement on just shooting someone in the head. It's not, and they should do it that way.
I mean, as I say, I'm against death penalty, period, but wasn't there a firing squad recently in some states?
There is technically a firing squad option, and there was an example of someone facing the death penalty who elected for that option because it is less horrifying. It is quicker. I mean, the guillotine is associated with the excesses of the French Revolution and just the execution of everyone at random.
Don't go throw guillotine.
Well, no, but it was invented as a less, because they used to, a drunken axeman swinging at you over and over again. You used to, going back to like Tudor England, where Henry VIII was having everybody
off
killed.
with their heads.
Was it Thomas Cromwell who had a horrific botched execution? People used to bribe the executioner to like, don't drink before you swing the axe. So the guillotine was an improvement on that process. We've made it worse again in order to, I think, make it not our responsibility. This is a medical procedure. Nope. You're killing someone. You should, if you're going to do that, you should take the position that that person deserves to die, and I am right to do that. And if you don't have that position, then don't do it. But don't make it like a medical kind of thing. It's not. It's killing someone.
Gruesome stuff.
All right, up next, we will talk about MSNBC Morning Joe's tanking ratings, a cheerier subject
than the guillotine.
Than the guillotine. Stay with us.